ठीक है.
How Gaurav is, we're missing Gaurav here. Is Gaurav? Oh, Gaurav, hi. Good to see you.
Really apologies for joining in late. I was having some issue with my travel.
No problem. Gaurav, I'll just do a quick round of introduction with everybody. So we have with us Ankit. Ankit runs My Operator. He's the founder CEO of the business. I have Rohan. Rohan is the co-founder of XYB. I have Milan. Milan is a business leader, possibly a serial entrepreneur. Right, our conversation is pending, but I'm going to take the liberty of calling him a serial entrepreneur. Milan runs One Silver Bullet, and we have Dheeraj with us. Dheeraj runs Skill Connect. So an eclectic mix, right? We unfortunately don't have Lokesh. He was our fifth speaker. He's in the hills and in a bad connectivity, right? So, and I think we're going to let him go on that one, and not really become an impediment in having fun, right, for this family. Gaurav, are we good to roll?
Absolutely, perfect.
Awesome, Shiva. Shiva, can you give me a cue, please?
So we are good to go.
Are we live?
Yes.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And it's a pleasure to host you again at CXO CXO Roundtable by Tata Tele Business Services. We've been doing some amazing sessions out here. The thought process behind doing some of these roundtables has essentially been to evangelize the cause of tech adoption, right? And I think tech adoption in today's time has just become so much more important. 2020 has been a revelation, right? And I think those are trends that are continuing, right? We were expecting 2021 to sort of normalize, but I think with what has happened, what we've experienced in 2021, and these are certain habits that are setting in, right? The interesting part is the consumer landscape has moved digitally, right? And I think every business will essentially have to calibrate themselves for a digital first environment, right? India is becoming one homogeneous market, which is just so much more interesting. We were always a complex market with many dichotomies, crevices, right? Cultural issues. I think a lot of that is possibly going away, right? We're becoming a content first economy, right? Everybody is creating content, and that essentially is leading to a lot of exposure and awareness in the clients and customers in today's time, right? Thus, it becomes important for businesses to understand a lot of those trends and really calibrate themselves. To be serving such an audience, right? That also means that the entire supply chain has to sort of move in a digitally first environment. Operational efficiency is going to become so much more important. And that's possibly what, we're going to cover through the course of our conversation, right? In a very focused way. The topic for discussion that we've taken today with our eclectic mix of our speakers today is recalibrating operational efficiency with smart tech. And, and within organizations, it'll become just so much more pertinent for organizations to bring in tech, and to ensure efficiency at every single step, right? The possibility of losing leakages has to be minimized in today's environment, right? That also is going to become important. Tech is also going to become important because organizations will have to, deal with ever-changing consumer requirements, right? And these are requirements that are going to be very, very inconsistent, not necessarily predictable, right? Without tech, to maintain that efficiency is going to be so much more difficult, right? With that, I would like to bring in, Gaurav Varshney, a dear friend and a deputy general manager of at Tata Tele Business Services. He's the SME regional manager for enterprise business. Gaurav, over to you for a quick round of introduction, and then we move into discussion today and introducing all of our guests.
Thank you, Ashu. Thank you for putting this so nicely, setting the context right. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, Milan. Good morning, Ankit, Rohan, and Dheeraj. It's a pleasure to have you in a CXO RT or a CXO roundtable, that we've been having from Tata Tele Business Services. A warm welcome from Tata Tele Business Services, and it's, honestly, I don't have many things to say right now. It's just that I'm quite keen and quite interested to hear the thought process and the digital transformation that you've been carrying out in your various or respective organizations. Just to give you a glimpse, service industry has been actually contributing close to 54% of India's GDP. It's a huge number, right? I mean, there was a time when agriculture and other industries were actually contributing more, but now in the last couple of decades, this has completely changed. 54% to the whole GDP of country. I think it's a tremendous story that we have on our hands right now, and obviously the pandemic and everything kind of has accelerated the complete digital transformation journey for all the SMEs across, I think, across the globe to be fair. So looking forward for a power-packed session, looking forward to understand from you what have you done, what has been your understanding and your journey in the last 2.5 years, and maybe learn something new from all of you guys. Back to you.
I like how Gaurav puts it, right? In a very modest way, right? I think with what I think this is for each one of you and all the audience out there, right? I think the way Tata Tele is kind of transformed itself from a very large ship, which was essentially focused on providing, the connectivity, right, and essentially the communication services. I think the way it's kind of calibrated itself into being, an extremely solid support system for business has been absolutely phenomenal. Not a lot of large organizations have been able to understand this changing landscape, right? And I think Gaurav, with of course the leadership at TVBS, has been phenomenal in doing this, evangelizing this, and ensuring that businesses are ready for this transformation, which is going to be required to deal with tomorrow. We're going to cover a lot of that through the course of conversation, gentlemen. Like I said, right, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I have with me today Dheeraj Ahuja, founder and CEO of Skill Connect. I have Ankit Jain. He's the founder and CEO of My Operator. Ankit, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I have Milan Ganatra, founder and CEO of One Silver Bullet. Milan, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And I have Rohan Raj Barua, co-founder, Expand My Business. Lokesh Singh, our last speaker for the panel, unfortunately couldn't make it. He's in the hills and we're letting him enjoy there with his family. But gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have each one of you with us. Like Gaurav said, right, this is an important discussion. This is a critical discussion, right? Of course, through the course of conversation, while we'll of course talk about a lot of good stuff that you've been doing in your organizations, I think this is going to also serve as a motivation for a lot of people who are on the fence, right? Who are kind of dealing with this complexity of changing their businesses and aligning it with tech, right? I think we'll try and cover all of those aspects, right? And possibly this will serve as a lot of motivation for many people who are trying to sort of find answers, right? How do they go about a lot of these things, right? And I think in you, they'll find some of those answers, possibly inspirations through the course of it, right? With that, I would want each one of you to quickly introduce yourself. Ankit, I'll come to you first. If you could quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little more about My Operator, I think that'll be a great start.
Sure. Thanks, Ashu. I'm Ankit Jain, founder and CEO of My Operator. My Operator helps small businesses manage their calls in a much digital way. So think about traditional call centers or EPBX systems. How would we be using those systems post-COVID? You cannot go back to office or access to devices. So what we really did, we virtualized those systems. So now managing calls over the cloud system became a lot easier. And that's why, we revolutionized this communication channel where you do not have to configure traditional hardware. You still are able to do it. We served close to 7,000 businesses. We are currently serving 7,000 businesses across India, managing their call communication. So
interesting. You're making small businesses look sharp, right? You're making them look more institutionalized in their practice, and that's incredible. Ankit, Rohan, I'm going to come to you quickly. If you could tell us a little more about yourself and talk about your business.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ashu, for having me here. It's a pleasure to get connected with everyone over this call as well. To give a quick introduction, so I'm Rohan. I'm the co-founder of Expand My Business. And what we are a fully managed marketplace for digital services. To simply being put, there are a lot of mid-sized companies, startups, even enterprise companies that are looking for tech solutions or taking their business online, right? But there's no way to do it right now. So we help them from the entire discovery of finding the perfect agency for who would be able to cater to them, and even delivering it end to end, from discovery to scoping of the work to finally delivery and managing and making sure that their payments are safe as well. We've been on this journey for about 3 years now. We have been funded by some of India's top VCs as well, and have served over 1,000 plus clients, and are continuously delivering and creating as much of an impact as we can to make sure that we can eventually help digitize India. Our vision is, of course, to go global and create a name for India as well.
Super. What a mission, right? We wish you all the very, very best, Rohan. And I think with Gaurav, we have another person, who has that understanding of what these businesses are possibly dealing with, right? Services is extremely complicated, right? We have another, great, leader with us, Milan. Quick round of introduction will be very helpful.
So thank you, Ashu, for this opportunity today. It's great to meet you all, you guys. So my name is Milan Ganatra. I'm the founder CEO at One Silver Bullet. This is my second venture. We're a COVID-born company. I formed this company last year in March, and our objective is to create, I would say, the gateways for investments and insurance. So we've already got our investment gateway up and live. Insurance gateway will be going live this month. So what we're trying to do is create a UPI for several investment product and insurance. So that's really kind of one-liner is what we are currently doing. So we've currently gotten 100 odd customers who are already on our gateway, and we're trying to digitize what's not currently been digitized.
Interesting. That's one of the most possibly exciting spaces to be in, right? And I think most importantly, empowering so many players, it just requires for a very different kind of a focus, right? And a lot of these are large enterprises, right? The sensitivity and the sensibility that you have to deal with is very different, right? And we're going to talk more about that as we go through, go with our conversation forward, right? Dheeraj, coming to you. Dheeraj, you've been a banker, leading insurance companies, and now leading Skill Connect, right? Where you're solving for the blue-collared category, right? And of course, empowering them to engage with larger institutions, right? It calls for a very different kind of an understanding, right? Because the landscape is now kind of changing, the behavior of consumers changing, which essentially means that the organizations will have to recalibrate very, very quickly, right? Quick introduction to yourself and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, morning, Ashu, and thanks for having me. It's good to listen to all the guests here, and I can assure you all, I think we'll collaborate with you as a consumer or as a So I'm Dheeraj Ahuja, founder and CEO of Skills Connect Global, and I think we are digitally transforming the Bharat and all the training institutions, the educational institutions out there, which are addressing the youth, which is not able to cut in terms of the marks that they secure or unfortunately drop out of education for whatever reason, to skill them and get into a good job. So you may be thinking that we are helping youngsters get into a job. Yes, we are, but our core business model is actually B2B. So we offer our software to training institutions and educational organizations in tier 2, tier 3 cities, so that they can launch their own private label, fully customized jobs platform, in which only relevant jobs for their network of students and alumni appear. And then when those people apply for those jobs, we actually do the last mile hiring level of activity, not just leave it at that. We make sure that they get a job, and then everyone in the stakeholder system is informed that the guy got a job, this is where he is right now, or he did not get a job, and that's a reason, so that guy can be counseled and skilled further to get a job. So we are the last mile connectivity business in blue collar space. We believe we are transforming this ecosystem using both digital as well as the process that we are following through. That's what makes our supply side very innovative. So that's
awesome.
Long and short of it.
Super. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have each one of you with us. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction, right? I'm going to move into my first question for this session, right? And what we're largely going to be discussing, like I said, the theme for our conversation today is recalibrating operational efficiency with smart tech, right? Which has just become so much more pertinent in today's time, right? Rohan, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm coming to you on this particular question, right? So I'd love to understand your thoughts around digital transformation, right? Because the both of you are essentially in a very, very unique position. You're literally, helping organizations very quickly switch to their digital requirements, right? Rohan, what's been last 2.5 years like, right? I'd love to understand from you what is it that you experienced, right? Because these have been very, very, very. This was a very different phase, right? From being a push-based service, this became a pull-based service, right? The unfortunate part was business did not necessarily understand which is the piece that they should deal with first, right? What's been your experience and observation during this time, right? And within your organization, how did you possibly, given that there's a lot of disruption that happened within the organization as well, right? How have you kind of dealt with that? I'd love to understand.
A great question. So, Ashu, it's a combination of many things actually, right? So I'm currently right in the middle of where a lot of people are coming online and going digital for the first time. Definitely, COVID has helped that, accelerated a few years further as well. What we would have probably expected in like a 2024 is probably happening in 2020 right now. It's really important to first understand that the timing is very crucial, right? Digital transformation is not something that is new. It has been happening for for years, for many years, decades actually. But how we look at digital transformation has actually changed, right? It's the ability to actually understand what data and AI is telling us that helps us drive this digital transformation. It's not just about building digital solutions anymore, because we have a plethora of those, startups, companies that are empowering these kind of new solutions. But what is been the new learning curve is how are we using that data to continuously empower and continuously improvise our efficiencies as well in whatever sector it is that we're doing. And why I say timing is very important is because if other industries are not going at the same pace, it's no point if I'm currently the leader in technology, whereas there are other industries that are not coming up to par. So timing is something that is very crucial, and being in sync with all these other industries is something that is really important. My experience over the last 2.5 years has been that, right, there's a lot of anxiety when it comes to digital, when it comes to small time businesses, going online for the first time, mid-sized businesses going for the first time. The anxiety is there because a lot of people don't have the kind of tech expertise. They're promoters, they're business driven, they understand what it is that they need to achieve. So we've been at the forefront of trying to help them out as much as possible, trying to get them to go online, so that essentially we're taking away the headache, and we're coming across, we're productizing the way services are being looked at. It's not a complex solution anymore, but it's it's very important to understand first why the customer has been facing problems, and addressing those exactly how we have been addressing it.
Super. Ankit, I'm gonna come to you, right? Like I said, right, you've been in a very unique position, right? So digital transformation is something that hit everyone. Telecommunication was possibly the first thing, right? Because building content kind of takes time. Responding to queries, for example, take time. Teams got distributed, right? I think the first thing that really became so much more important was to crack communication, right? Of course, Zoom is handy, right? And of course, I'm going to talk to Gaurav more about it as we go through the conversation, right? Because Tata Tele Business Services built a phenomenal stack of services, right? They represent Zoom as well in India. We're going to talk about that separately, right? But Ankit, what has been this phase like, right? I'd love to understand that, because you are possibly the first guy who would have had it from an experiential standpoint, right? Understanding the complexity that the business owners had to deal with. Like, what's been business transformation like in the last 1.5, 2 years that you've seen?
Absolutely, and thanks, Ashu. We definitely were in the middle of this whole thing, because we were serving thousands of businesses, and suddenly we saw there was a very different uncertainty phase. Business are not sure how this is going to happen. How business operation will be running. There's certain sector of certain part of businesses which understood it pretty early, that we have to immediately focus on digitizing it, moving online, moving to a remote culture, moving to a work from home culture. And there were certain segments which just wanted to wait immediately. We saw a lot of decline in businesses who were not ready to change. The business immediately went down. But the businesses who understood this is an opportunity, we'll have to change our way and keep continuing. We saw immediate surge in the whole adoptions around, especially telephony. And telephony, definitely, people spoke about Zooms or all these cloud-based video conferencing. But if you see the landscape, the most of customer interaction still happens over phone. It's not Zoom call. Zoom calls are very good for internal communication or 1 or 2 time demo. But when you really talk about day-to-day engagement with customers, it's going to be on phone. The immediate challenge with a lot of businesses we saw back then, I'm talking about the moment it happened, the 2020 started. The immediate challenge was, how are the managers or leaders going to manage their team, which is distributed now across. They'll not be coming to office. They do not have them sitting next to them and probably looking at how they're performing. Now they have to look at data to understand how the team is working, if the process is smooth or not. And immediately there, the need of cloud telephony or similar such systems we saw, immediately emerged, because now businesses wanted to see how much calls their team is making, how's the customer feedback like, how's the pitch like, how are you training the team, etc. We have been pitching about these systems for quite a time, but the immediate transformation that came in, and which Rohan even rightly mentioned, we even extend that. We say, like, probably in 2021 we were sitting at 2027. That kind of transformation we saw from that perspective. The kind of questions immediately changed. The kind of hesitance, a lot of a lot of hesitance was even from the enterprise perspective. I'm not just talking about small business, but even enterprise. There was a say that enterprise will still prefer on-premise system to hold the
Sure.
data.
Right.
But the moment this happened, the enterprise buying changed, the enterprise process changed, the systems changed. They moved to cloud. They started buying without physical meetings at the first.
Right.
And there was a immediate mindset change that happened. That this is how we can do. And this is such a transformation because there was no other challenge in adopting it apart from our own hiccups or believe that this is the way it should be done. But the moment digitization pushed everybody, even the digital payments, across. The digital payment was existing in India for some time now, and people are still hesitant to adopt it to the last month. But the moment this happened, even more than what demonetization done, actually, if you think from that, even more than what demonetization done, this whole COVID thing, made people use the digital payment at a very, very large scale now.
Interesting.
People,
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
So I think there are some very important points that you highlighted. Like, in fact, through the course of conversation, we're going to talk about the challenges, right? Because what you're kind of alluding to is just such a big, mindset challenge, right? We've been a country which has continued to push, right? Which has continued to delay demand in certain form and way, right? And this has been a period which is now we have no other choice, right? I think the behavioral change that has happened, right, is phenomenal, and we're going to cover that more, Ankit, as we go into conversation, right? Gaurav, I'm going to come to you before I move to Dheeraj and Milan, right? Now, TDBS has been very quick to understand the change that was required, right? And possibly also the need of a very large brand to come in and and essentially handle that kind of a crisis, right? Because with credibility, there's a certain trust that comes in, right? And Tatas have, for example, been one brand which has been one of the most trustworthy brands in the process, right? You very quickly changed gears, right? The role from, like I said, right, being a connectivity provider, very quickly switched to being, assistance, right? First model, where you were dealing with a lot of these SMEs, MSMEs, right, and helping them in digital transformation play, right? I'd love to understand from you, right? Of course, Ankit has his experiences, Rohan has experiences, right? But in your capacity, you deal with 90,000 plus SMEs, MSMEs across the country, right? And that's a very, very large number. Right? How has that experience been? What is that? You're in an advantage position, right, to make a comment, right? I'd love to understand that across layers of India, right? Because businesses are not only happening in, say, a tier one city, and that's about it, right? It happens across the layers, right? What's been your experience? Love to understand that.
So I think great question, Ashu. The thing is that when this whole pandemic started, or when the lockdown started, there were a lot of MSMEs, or even for that matter, all the corporates were really reluctant and were also very worried about the business continuity. I think that's where Tata Tele Business Services actually really helped the SMEs or the bigger corporates in that sense by providing them the collaboration tools which were needed. So, for example, Zoom, right? We are the, as you know, that we're the only authorized, not the only, but the biggest authorized reseller of Zoom across the country. Similarly, product like Smart Internet, Tata was always into the internet lease line for corporates, but working from home, working from various various locations across the country, the MSME wanted some kind of a security layer to be put on the ILL. That's where we came up with a solution like Smart Internet.
Interesting.
Similarly, there was a contact center need which was actually which just suddenly arose in the country because everybody was actually calling a call center, whether for a medicine, whether for groceries or various various needs. That's where we came up with a solution like a Smart Flow, which actually helped us put the contact center together virtually, right? So what essentially we were able to do is basically help MSME out in the mix of things where they needed the help most, right? Similarly, another solution that I can talk about is the cybersecurity solution. While everybody was working from home, there was a dire need to get a solution which will help and secure their devices as well as their network. That's why we came up with a solution like cybersecurity. So I think, in a nutshell, what I can say is that we were fortunate enough to understand, number one, the need of the hour, and number two, with the product capabilities and with the group understanding and everything, we were able to deliver it on time, which actually, to be honest, MSMEs were really happy about because they came back and said, this was something that we were looking for at that point of time. So
Gaurav, while you say that, right, I can only think and I think it's difficult to fathom the sleepless nights that I think each one of you has had in the process, right? I think it's just such a cumbersome phase to deal with, right?
Let's not go there.
We'll save that for another conversation, Gaurav. Milind, I'm going to come to you, right? And I think we've discussed what happened in 2020, right? I think it's been a defining moment, right, for a country like India, and the complexities. I mean, you've been there, right? You've built softwares, right? You've dealt with, a lot of those challenges that kind of exist, right? But before I come to challenges, right, what I would love to, ask, right, is, and this is more a forward-looking question, right? Uh, what's now the meaning of scaling up, right? And this is a very important question and relevant question for you because you've seen scaling across both of these phases, right? Dheeraj, I'm going to come to you on this question in just a bit, right? But Milind, I'd love to understand from you. What, for example, digital transformation, right? How do you think is going to contribute to the growth of the organization going forward, right? It's just become so much more pertinent, right? Would love to understand from you. Milind, you're on mute.
So great question, Ashu. And history has proved that anything which has got digitized has potentially scaled up. So I'll go back to my earlier days, because I'm being always been part of financial services and experienced capital market to the closest. And I really observed before digitization of stock exchange happened in the country, the volumes were like 1,000th what is there today. Okay, it's purely because the stock markets were digitized, or another product like mutual fund was digitized. So any product which is, or any services which has got digitized, okay, has actually potential to generate volumes which are unprecedented. Okay, because the ease of use gives people kind of power in their hand to take those. The transaction volumes will just zoom up. So history has said, history has proven that anything which is digitized, the volume scale up. Now we come to any kind of business, whether it was with the way Rohan or Ankit highlighted in terms of payments and so on and so forth, the volumes increased just because it's been digitized, because it's extremely convenient. Okay, so my view is that we are still long way to go. Obviously, this has a great potential, and I think as India as a country, I just want to really appreciate every Indian. We've been kind of really early. We've been kind of adopting technology to the best, and I think we are. And trust me, it's not just the young age group which is willing to adopt technology or digitize. Even my 82-year-old mother, which she had never used a mobile phone in her life, okay, in this pandemic, she's just on YouTube, she's only on OTT, she's on WhatsApp, she's able to buy things online. Okay, so things have changed. So the beauty of our country is that we've learned to adopt digitization and technology. I think which is where I think we are in a race to kind of scale, and which is where I think India is the best bet in every sense. Population is on our side. We have the population which is willing to adopt. The way let's say a very simple thing, the vaccination program. It's fully digitized, right? If you really look at it. Okay, and I don't know if you happen to see that we could really have a live dashboard, which no other country in the world has been able to offer. Okay, so I think we're here to kind of scale up. I see an amazing future of the digitization and the kind of scale which our country is going to achieve. So I'm pretty excited to be part of this.
Interesting. Your second part of my question was, how has your organization, for example, particularly, right, dealt with it? Because the environment that you're in requires a lot of touch and feel. There is, financial services sector has been the most agile sector when it comes to adoption of technology, and you kind of alluded to it. 1994, we had the stock markets that got digitized, right? And we've seen the kind of volume swells, right, that has happened. It's gotten so much more transparency. It's weeded out inefficiency, right? At an organizational level, right, when you're dealing with such an agile environment, right? What has that done to the thought process? What's scaling up for you, for example, in an environment like the one we are in? I'd love to understand that. For example, sales goes online, right? Is that one particular piece that has changed, or the entire value chain across the organization has changed?
I think the entire value chains, because I'll just tell you, I had a very interesting time. I was handing over my earlier company. Okay, so the first year of I would divide pandemic into two parts for myself personally. The first part was I was a CEO of a very large company, which I handed over. So we were able to increase volumes and amazing business, which we did. And I'm a COVID-born company, so which was obviously kind of a thought was really kind of sometimes it was scary, saying, "Oh, you're going to really set up the organization with nobody." And we were able to kind of hire 75 member team. We are already a 75 member team in less than 12 months. I think it was not difficult. I mean, one thing I can tell
Get your
you.
point.
Yeah, so it was not a difficult. We
did not have that baggage.
Yeah, we didn't have the baggage. But the beauty is the entire ecosystem was adopting digitization, and you got the support. So whether it was forming a company, opening a bank account, to hiring people, to creating a product, acquiring customers, having meetings, and in fact, I'm building an entire ecosystem. So being able to successfully build, I've been able to acquire 100 customers. Obviously, sales has become far more easier because today, most of your meetings, which were in person, have actually moved to Zoom. So that's a big transformation. So it works very, very well. And I think all of us have, as an organization, have accepted a hybrid work. A hybrid system. We were working till home. Working from home until this month, to be very frank. And I don't think we will go back to office completely. I don't think. So
I was in a conversation with a very dear friend yesterday, right? And they're an edtech company. I think which is a lesson for each one of us here, right? They've acquired 5,000 schools in these last 2 years. Can you beat that, right? And they operate. There is no feet on street model, right? And that's how they want to scale. And that's possibly the new version of these businesses. Who could have thought, you could acquire 5,000 schools in a matter of 2 years? That's phenomenal, right? And I think the good part is that, like Ankit had alluded, right, that the bureaucracy in buying, for example, has changed, right? And I think which is just so much more phenomenal, right? Here it's coming to you. A question which, and I asked Milan, of course, I want to go into kind of continue that question, right? In your environment, which is, where there's a lot of training which is happening, where there are, there's a lot of recruitment, for example. You are at that very important juncture, right? Where you are at one hand, empowering people by giving them right knowledge, information, and preparing them for a better life. And on the other hand, you have a client, right, which is kind of dealing with an extreme complexity, right? A huge continuity risk of sorts, right? How has this been for you from a client standpoint, from an operational standpoint? I'd love to understand that, right? How is it that you've engineered this? And what's going to be the growth trajectory going forward? That I think all organizations today are skewed towards having a more digital dependent, for example, say growth plan. How are you calibrating and how are you planning for it? I'd love to understand that.
Yeah, I think COVID has brought the world to a new reality. All of us recognize that. And I think for us as a business, it pushed us into a fast. Are you not able to hear me?
I can now see you. I think there was a little bit of a yes. I can now see you.
Yeah. So I was saying that COVID has been a game changer for the entire world. I think it's a once in a lifetime event, which did a lot of course, harm to the humanity. But I think if you look at the businesses, several businesses while struggled, but many other actually thrived, and we were one of those businesses because not only did it allow us to put the seriousness of digitally transforming oneself among our customer prospects more pronouncedly, and the adoption result was very, very high. So in our business, while it's a job being provided to a youngster, and we all know they are digitally quite savvy, but when it comes to job search, they're still very, very dependent on others to help them get a job. So how do we digitally enable them or transform the businesses of our training partners? It required a pivot into our business model, which thankfully has enabled us to move very quickly and scale also business. So I think like everyone on the panel has said, that businesses realized that if they have to survive and grow, they will have to adopt digital. So was the case in our customer audiences where people sitting in Gaya in Jehanabad, where I'm visiting
Right.
today and tomorrow, an ITI, Industrial Training Institute owner, who perhaps is just a graduate many decades ago, now he's adopting technology, which is ours, which is Gazab Jobs, to launch a job website for their students. So he is realizing that if he has to address 800 students for jobs in a single day, I mean, he cannot do it manually. He needs a digital platform so that he can also reach scale. So I think COVID actually brought a lot of good for our customers, for our business perspective. And I think we are looking at several digital interventions even in the journey. So like Ankit here, who has a My Operator as a business, I think has a lot to offer to all our customers to ensure their journey, their students' journey to jobs can be very, very easily managed. And we are looking at someone from fintech or also tech space to offer new products to our network. Yeah. So
I love this about I love this about
something which would
I love this about entrepreneurs who've been bankers, right? We try and figure solutions and merge it with our system, which is incredible, right? I think that agility is just so much more important in today's time, right? And I think that is also very critical for transformation in general, right? And this is an example of that, right? Ron, I'm coming to you, and Ankit, then I'm coming to you after that. Now, this has been a very challenging environment. Ankit alluded to it. Everybody kind of talked about it, right? But I would like to specifically sort of understand it, right? Now, there have been challenges internally and externally, right? I would like to understand, this has not been an easy phase, right? This has been a fairly difficult phase for, I think, each organization, right? The most difficult of all of this has been, aligning the teams with, getting the right infrastructure, getting them the right motivation, momentum to continue to perform, right? How has that been for you, right? Because, you are in a business, Rohan, where you have to deliver for a client, right? That essentially means there is a lot of coordination, there are a lot of stakeholders. It just becomes a mammoth task to continue to deliver at that with that focus and with that sharpness, right? And in an environment where you have no other choice, but now you distribute it, right? And possibly that's going to be the concept going forward as well, because organizations realize that that's how they can be so much more leaner, right? I'd like to understand some of these challenges that you kind of dealt with, and going forward, what are some of the strategies that you devised in the process, right? Are there some tools that you're using which help you understand, say, for example, workflow better, right? To keep the continuity of connectivity in place, right? I'd love to understand that.
Ashu, carry on to continue what you're asking, right? It's definitely been a bit of a challenge, right? It's not something that has been as easy as the click of a button. Luckily, on our side, our team is a relatively young team, so like Milan was saying as well, the young folks are a bit savvier when it comes to implementing or even executing those new kind of technology tools as well. So that has definitely been a big help for us. But in terms to answer your question, right, managing those kind of stakeholders and sort of enabling their digital presence as well. See, one very important thing is that now it's not an option for you to go online anymore, right? It is a necessity. So buyers understand the point that, listen, like if I'm not going to take my store online, if I'm not going to have a presence online, my business is not going to grow because everybody else around them is growing, right? So the first thing that I always focus on is what value and what is the impact that we are creating, right? That is the most important thing, because stakeholder management is something that comes second, in my opinion, right? I mean, you can build tools, like you guys have all worked in, different sectors, different industries where you're using multiple CRMs or multiple sort of workflow management tools. There are a plethora of these kind of services that is available to use. But what is very important to identify is that what is actually creating the true impact, right? So what customers want to hear, how is their visibility coming onto the project, right? How are they speaking to the how are they speaking to the agencies that they're working with? How are they speaking to account managers? So all this is something that we ourselves are trying to integrate into our product, right? Because that is the value that we see. More importantly, at the end of the day, your digital transformation, in my opinion, has always 4 outcomes, right? One is you're always trying to you're trying to get better engagement with customers, trying to improve your empowerment with your employees. Third is, transforming the kind of business model and operations that you have. And fourth and most important point is how are you actually revolutionizing your product to get forward in that sector as well.
Right.
So in my opinion, I focus on these four things. And I think a byproduct of this is something that we come up with, what we call digital solutions, right? Which each one of us are trying to solve in our own way. So I think that would be my take, even in terms of managing stakeholders. It's not an option anymore, right? It's they have.
But Rohan, tell me this, right? Rohan, tell me this, right? Now you're in an environment, like I said, right? I mean, for me, the question with Ankit is going to be very different, right? Because there's a product at play, right? And the applicability of the product is universal in many ways, right? In your case, what I want to understand is the challenges in that entire delivery process, right? Because it's like I said, right? Many stakeholders, right? You have your teams, you have your delivery partners, you have a client, right? Now the client is under a tremendous amount of pressure that you get them the whatever service that you're delivering, say a website or say an e-commerce site or whatever, right? You are in a way responsible for their business continuity, right? The pressure on you is just so much more, right? In a broken down system, of course, we're now a little better, things have changed, right? I'd love to understand some of this, that, how is it that, for example, some of the things that you've done, right, which have helped you to engineer the processes better, right, and also handle client expectations. I'd love to understand that. I mean, macros, of course, I think each one of us kind of commented on the macros, right? But I'd love to understand on specifics, if you could highlight some of them in terms of how you've been able to do that, right? Because my sense is some of this is going to be so much more relevant for many of the services players that are out there, right, who are, say, in a way struggling with them, right? So I'd love to understand some specifics that you've been able to do to ensure the client side commitment doesn't get diluted at your delivery by your delivery team, right? If you could highlight that.
Got it. So, Ashu, again, we have three stakeholders that we actually refer to. I'll come to the most important one last, the customers, right? From an internal perspective, again, it's something that is a part of the process. It's something that we are building. So it's not a challenge implementing internally. Even when it comes to the kind of vendors that we're in touch with, these guys are all digital agencies already in the past. So their hands are quite warm when it comes to, implementing new technologies as well. So it's not a challenge with them either. It's the challenge more comes to sort of, break the kind of tradition that they have been using and to sort of, put a new ecosystem out in front of them. That would be the challenge, but not in terms of them being ready to go digital, right? And coming to your question, customers. So we are actually bringing structure and organization to a very, very unorganized sector at this point of time, right? What was the problem earlier was that customers wouldn't get proper visibility. They weren't able to find the correct kind of agency. And even when it comes to payment solutions, right, there was no visibility on that. So to solve them, how we have improved it. So we have our algorithm that shortlists earlier what would take about 23, 24 days to even find an agency that could be incorrect, a hit and trial method. We have our, we have an algorithm that allows us to shortlist agencies within the click of a button, like literally in a matter of seconds. Secondly, when it comes to visibility, right, transparency and visibility is something that is super important. Customers aren't worried that if you've promised them a 2-month timeline, it's going to take 2.5 months, but they would like to know that why is it taking 2.5 months? They would like to understand the challenges and maybe perhaps themselves give inputs. And the third and most important part is the payment, right? And India, like the gap of trust in India is very high. India in our vision is that it's the mecca of IT services, but the problem is that there's a lack of trust. So we opened an escrow solution, and we've also been backed by Mr. Bharat Shah, who's the co-founder chairman of HDFC. Our escrow solution is actually something that is really empowering both the clients and the vendors, because vendors don't have to run behind clients for monies anymore. CEOs that get raised in 30 days, and clients have a very upfront way of saying that yes, it has been approved, the milestone can be done, so the money can be transferred forward. So there's no lack of payment, and there's no sort of anxiety around that as well. So this is
I think those are some very interesting points that you highlighted, Rohan, and I will come to you in just a bit, right? But I'm going to go to Ankit, right? Ankit, for the teams, it's been a difficult time, right? Of course, you're a product company, and one was that there was like a lot of pressure on product teams to very quickly go out and deliver, right? And that was one, right? And then there was also that there was a lot of new discovery which was happening in the process, right? Organizations were realizing that within that environment, you could do A, you could do B, you could do C, right? And because also the adoption was in a way working as a motivation, right? What's been your sense on some of these challenges, right? So to ensuring that the continuity between the teams continue to be there, so that there is no leakage that gets built in the process, or there's no inefficiency that gets built in the process, right? All of us know that the challenge in dealing with teams is that and a large set of employees is that, transfer of task is where the most gap essentially comes in, right? Inefficiencies come in, right? People don't necessarily tend to hand over very properly, right? Responsibilities are unavailable, right? It's a huge challenge for a promoter like yourself, right? I would love to understand, how have you dealt with this? What are some of possibly the things that you've done, right? To, of course, one, maintain that communication better. Second, possibly also an offshoot in terms of innovation, right? That could have come up through your observation, right? Because a founder is a keen observer, right? I think that's a common constant across each one of you. Would love to understand this one.
Sure. So, I'll cite with one number to begin, Ashu. Our IT budget has actually, the IT tool budget has increased to 3 times post this pandemic. Which if I break it down, the number of tools that we started using actually increased by 60%, and all the tools that we were using earlier, we actually upgraded the plan even. And this is what I'm saying, when we always took a pride of being a young company, being a very tech-savvy company. This has been the scenario, which means the overall adoption, even in the organization, which used to call digital first organization, is a phenomenal transformation there.
Sure.
We had to bring in a lot of new systems for workflow management. As you rightly said, workflow became one of the serious tasks in coordination when you have entire team working remotely. So we really were able to adopt to workflow systems, a lot of contract management system, a lot of process management systems internally that we had to adopt as we move to this whole journey. And at the same time, we realized there is a very important process of communication, which we needed to intact. So as a founder, then that's where particularly me and my co-founder played a role, that let's try to guide team that this is going to be the future. It's not just going to be a change in the mindset from working from home to working from office. It's going to be a change where you are just unlearning the old way of working and moving to a very new way of working. You're going to be changing from a synchronous communication to asynchronous communication for a way. Even the digital savvy people started getting a fatigue. They have to sit all day in front of the system, answering chats, answering workflows, talking to this thing. But definitely, being a leader, you have to drive this. You have to constantly say, "Oh, this will pass by. We'll adopt to this. We'll adopt to this." And then eventually, as we see right now, we decided to stay remote because we felt like this is amazing, thing that we have been able to attain as a team. It came with a challenge, a mammoth of challenge. But when you solve this, there's a plethora of benefit that you see being a digital first company.
Interesting, and the undying spirit of a founder, right? And how, Ankit, but I think there's a very important and a pertinent point that you highlighted, right? And which is that the businesses have started to, pay for a lot of these products that have been, and the services, right? And I think that's a huge change, which is coming, right? I think we were always considered to be a country and an economy which never paid for digital services, right? And I think this shift has been absolutely phenomenal, right? Today we are factoring in a lot of these costs as a factory cost, right? As the cost of doing business, which is phenomenal, right? We continue to evade it for the longest time, right? In fact, we are one country which is, possibly when it comes to the penetration of cybersecurity, right, is terrible, right? When it comes to the penetration numbers, we're going to talk a little about that through the course of conversation, right? But I think this is a phase which has really changed all of this. I think business continuity has become a priority, right? Gaurav, I'm going to come to you. Now, a lot of what, for example, Rohan said, and a lot of what Ankit said, right? You were essentially enabling a lot of this, right? Zoom partnership, for example, has been is a very, very, very pertinent partnership that you've been able to forge in the process, right? Continuity for SMEs also again was like really, really broken down. What I would love to sort of, I would want you to give a sense is that what's been your experience internally and externally, right? All these connectivity tools, for example, that you've been able to very quickly help organizations absorb, right? What's been your experience on that front, right? From an efficiency standpoint, how have these organizations done through the course of time, right? Could they manage to save a significant downfall, which, say in the first quarter and the second quarter of 2020 that happened? And how's been the recovery? I'd love to understand that.
So I think, Ashu, I'll probably try to answer this question in two parts. One was obviously the need of these tools, right? I mean, when the pandemic started, obviously there was no way out for the organization but to use these tools, whether to collaborate, whether to continue the business. Second is obviously when you talked about how this actually helped maybe in terms of increasing productivity and efficiency. So look, I think where we were able to help all these SMEs out were that we actually worked with them to do an internal audit of these organizations And
Right.
then we kind of suggested them, look, these are some of your most manual processes where you can go and digitize it. And that's where we kind of put in our expertise as solution architects, were working with the organization, with their founders, with their CEOs, and saying, look, these are your typical manual process. And we as an organization feel that if you try and digitize this, I think that's where you're going to improve your productivity. And that's where, there will be obviously an operational cost, cutting over. So I think certain things did obviously help them out. And yes, when I talk to some of the SMEs who come back to us and tell that, that look, your some of your products did help us out. However, there've been some SMEs, where we were actually facing a lot of difficulties, specifically from the mindset of the senior level, because we need to understand that digital transformation is more of a mindset journey than anything else, right? Because yes, there was obviously a need of it. There was obviously a kind of a push from the pandemic side. However, the first digitization journey starts from the CEO level. I mean, you need to understand the need of it, and please, that's what I tell all my SME friends as well. We need to factor that cost as a factory cost rather than as a product cost. Because the moment you start putting that cost as a separate cost, I think that's where the SMEs or the organization will start struggling, because they'll not be able to justify the cost of it. So I think that's my take on it, Ashu. That's where
No, I think that's very interesting, Gaurav. And I continue to sort of in a market like India, right? For the longest time, we did not have a player who evangelized the cause of adoption, right? I think there've been very many large players, right? But all of these players have gone out and essentially have had a product first approach, right? Where they've tried to fit in a product in a certain in a certain business, right? Without understanding the requirements of that. And I think it has to be a 360-degree approach, which essentially is what you also sort of alluding to. Milan, I'm going to come to you, right? I think actually, this is a question for each one of you in the process, right? Now, while of course we talk of digital transformation, which has just become so much more important, right? And I think all organizations internally and externally, with say clients, customers, we're trying to bring in and include solutions which are relevant, right? Which continue to help us communicate better and internally optimize our processes, right? During all of this, right, there comes one very, very strong risk, which is that of cyber risk, right? Data privacy, again, is something which has become just so much more important, right? Because there's so much of consumption which is happening. There's like a lot of original work which is happening, right? Data privacy, you're dealing with a lot of customer information, right, across systems. Milan, this question is essentially to you. You're on a mute. If you could unmute yourself.
Correct.
You're in one of the most fragile ecosystems, right? You really can't go wrong there. I remember I started a business, right, which was in the money management. And around the time, there was a huge litigation that had happened between Google and Vodafone, right? And I think the settlement was upwards of $1 billion, right? And that just changed the tone of the industry. That was 2012, 13, right? Today, it's just very, very different, right? We have newer laws that have come up. Like I said, organizations become just so much more sensitive around handling customer data, right? The responsible partners, for example, increased or quadrupled, if not doubled, right? What's been your experience on these two fronts, on cybersecurity and on data privacy? I'd love to understand from you.
I think I'll just break this response into two parts. So one is cybersecurity and personal data. I'll first address the personal data issue, which I don't think as India as a country, we have enough regulations to really maintain and manage or take the guilty to a task. So I think we need regulations like GDPR and so on and so forth, which will kind of ensure that the privacy or the information regards to anybody should not be easily available. And although there are advantages and disadvantages, you will not be able to do several AIs and algos which today we'll be able to run. But I think is very critical to really secure that. And I think we need to really work really hard on that, because once a client loses a comfort, a user loses the confidence on any such information which is available publicly, eventually he is going to get perturbed and going to be very cautious about it.
Right.
So I think we need to really work really hard on this, very honestly. Coming to your second point, or the first point, which was on the security, we've done quite a bit. There is a recognition. There are people who are taking care of right there in the product design, making sure that they do not store enough information, or rather take all the steps to make the platform secure.
Sure.
But there have been enough instances of this, and I think that will continue. I think that's the biggest threat which we are all facing, very honestly.
Right.
And I feel each one of us are extremely have to take this responsibility and really work towards this. I don't see our networks being completely secured. I am seeing huge amount of compromises being done on a daily basis. We still a long way to go, very honestly. So I think, I don't feel comfortable because.
But Milan, tell me this, right? What is leading into this say casualness, if I can put it that way, right? What is leading into that approach and attitude, right? Which is leading into say these inefficiencies.
See, I don't think it is. I mean, I think we are in a hurry as a country, or the startup ecosystem, and actually we're looking at the final solution. We're not always looking at and because our regulations and laws are really not in place. So I'm not really worried. Let's say as a startup, if I'm holding any PI data of any customer, there is no regulation which really kind of takes me to ask in case I was to resell that, and so on and so forth. Sure. So we've been very casual about it. So I think because there is no regulation around it, and I think we need extremely strong regulations to really protect this. And I think and that is where there is a casualness. It's like if there was let's say there was no speed trap on a expressway, we're gonna run at a high speed, and which is what is today really happening. And we're doing our bit, but it's still not enough. I mean, it has to improve dramatically. My personal view is that it has to improve dramatically. Although we do VAPTs and a lot of tests all around, but they need to be done. To my mind,
I was recently in a conversation with a CISO, right? And we happened to talk of all of these security risks, right? And he just listed out 3-4 of them, and that kind of shocked me, right? And I kind of concur with what you're saying, Milan. That I think there's this, we've not really understood the sensitivity around it, right? But I think from an organization standpoint, it's just become so much more important, right? Dheeraj, I'd love to understand from you, right? How are you dealing with some of these aspects, right? Because like I said, this is something which could disrupt your delivery across your value chain, right? How are you dealing with cybersecurity? How are you dealing with data privacy, right? I'd love to understand that.
So I think basic hygiene, from addressing the basic hygienes to ensuring that we have strict compliances both on technology front as well as the processes front. So we are a SaaS business. So anyone who takes our product, he gets his network onto that platform. Right. So right from our business to partnering with our B2B customer, we have straightforward disclaimers, and also part of the agreement. There are ample protections to ensure that data privacy and data protection things are taken care of. And in the process, when they onboard their job seekers, there also we have several disclaimers and agreements just to make sure that everybody's aware. However, I think from a technology front at the back, I think it's where the technology team has ensured that the structure, the architecture of the entire product and the database management is following all the protocols that are there.
Right.
But you obviously get a lot of anxieties or questions from both our institute partners as well as the job seekers, that what happens to my data, this is my data and all. And I keep advising or educating them, guys, there's no one who owns data except the person himself or herself. You are just a custodian, you're just a conduit. Don't think that you have the data ownership or you can do whatever you want to do. So I think it's been a good journey in terms of educating the crowd on the ground, that while you're applying or while you're taking any services that from us, don't give your data. Especially in our case, we employers do end up asking for KYC. Like, educate them. Please don't ask us to get KYC documents of our users. This is against the law. I can be put behind the bars. Why are you doing that? So they end up. They end up going back to their compliances and checking it out. And they said, "Oh, thank you, Dheeraj, you told us that." So, I mean, in the country, data protection and the laws are still not very clear on the ground level. And since we are operating in tier two, even worse from an awareness perspective. So we have to be really careful here.
I have been telling this to Gaurav and the GTBS team that there's like a separate focus and an independent focus that has to happen on data privacy and cybersecurity, right? Because, and I'm going to talk to Gaurav about that in just a bit, right? They've been doing some interesting work, right? But I think the evangelism needs to happen at a completely different level, right? Ankit, I'm going to come to you, right? Now you're in a very, very unique position, right? Cybersecurity, data privacy become just so much more pertinent, right? How have you dealt with it, right? How are you prioritizing in the entire scheme of things? I'd love to understand the construct of how for example, it's part of the foundational play that you're building of the product.
Sure. So, the good part is because we were always a cloud player, and cloud comes with a lot of, these security system very natively built. But unlike most people think, cloud is an unsecure system, we think otherwise because you tend to think security is a very native part of the whole system. You tend to start that, and eventually, you're much more secure than any traditional system. So that's one aspect that definitely helped us become secure in the first place. But when the pandemic happened, there was another challenge. Now, team used to access all these data from their own premises, from their home, from their own devices. Even we had to move to BYOD policy because how are we going to manage the device across India? Now that led to a very different challenges. How are we going to protect customers' data when our team is able to access those from their own systems? And then we had to come up with a lot of additional algorithms to ensure how much people are accessing, what are they accessing, and just keep on running algorithms over it, keep on analyzing what is happening, etc. On top of it, though many people talked about the data privacy issues from business to consumer perspective, there is an angle which I think is very important, which is very relevant. How company gonna ensure the data protection between their own teams, between their own members, this is something which is very underrated, very rarely talked. We believe that we can implement a lot of systems to be able to protect the data, but that's not the reality. Is that there has to be a balance between just the tools and technology that we develop versus certain policy which also helps companies protect the data between their teams as well. And this has been definitely one of the key concern always with us. We started implementing all new technologies and services to be able to protect data for our customers. Very of late, one of the things that we implemented was nobody is able to access the data without having two key, which means two person has to open the lock and then only so those systems, technology is always needed to protect that.
Interesting. Rohan, I want to come to you. In with paucity of time, very quickly. How are you handling all of this, right? I think like Ankit, it's a distributed team that you're working with, right? And like I said, right, there is a lot of client side sensitivity that you have to sort of factor, right? How have you been able to tackle these two issues?
So from a from a regulatory front, I'd have to agree with what was said earlier, that we are very far away from it, very honestly speaking. Like today's conversation, we're talking about digital transformation and how buyers are are getting to terms with that, right? We've seen an adoption that is there. So in my opinion, cybersecurity and data privacy is something that we as a country are very far away from at this point of time. We could definitely continue to increase those kind of compliances that are there. Taking a bit of reference from the Western culture, right? Like you see that cybersecurity over there, data privacy is a very big thing. Even when we serve foreign customers, right? The first thing that we're asked is things like, are we GDPR compliant? And, there are different laws that apply for different countries. So see, from our behalf, in terms of what we are doing as a company, yes, we are being as safe and as confidential as possible. We make sure to sign NDAs. We make sure to have a proper audit trail behind everything that is being done, and also show the certification, your ISO certifications, whatever it might be. But when it comes to the cybersecurity part of it, I look at it from two different from two views, right? One is it depends on the kind of scale of business that we're talking about, and second is who it is that you're targeting, right? When for scale, like there are in India, there are over 700 million internet users, right? If you're serving a mass, you have to be data compliant, because sometime or the other it's going to come back and bite you in the back, right? And secondly, when you're referring to enterprise clients and enterprise businesses, they are very, very focused and very articulate on how you need to be data compliant as well. So it totally depends on what stage of company you are and what is the kind of audience that you're catering to. But in terms of cybersecurity, I would say that we are quite a few years away.
Thank you, Rohan, on that one. Gaurav, coming to you, right? I think you've been in the the thick of things, right? And I think with all of what everybody said, right? I think everybody's trying to sort of do a hedge or hedge themselves by covering themselves legally, right? I think, uh, but and I think this is something that we've done, discussed at a personal level, right? Beyond this conversation, right? That it just becomes so much more important to evangelize right kind of adoption and understanding of everything around cybersecurity and data privacy, right? I think we cannot, just try to build an aegis which is that of being legally compliant, right? I think it's truly understanding, and I think it's a responsibility of a business, right? And that's essentially how I see it, right? Gaurav, in your case, you've done a lot of work, right? With all of your teams, you've done a lot of work on ensuring that it gets communicated to all SMEs, MSMEs, right? It gets prioritized in their order. As important as digital transformation is, equally important is ensuring that you're the right, you've covered yourself with pretty much all risks that could occur, right? And on the client side, ensuring that you're maintaining the right frameworks, you're maintaining right, you're on the right side of law. Of course, more responsible, right? Would love to understand from you what has been your experience, right? And some observations that have really stood out, during this process of building this awareness about cybersecurity
Sure.
and data privacy in general.
I think you know what I really agree with Milan. When he said actually as a country we are too fascinated about the results, right? We're so excited about getting a result that we actually sometimes forget the process. And the process is something which I mean, if you look at the Western side of it, they actually are the guys who really focus on the process rather than the result. I think that's where we, as an organization, or we as an SME player, sometimes tend to forget the real process of securing your data and real process of ensuring that your data is in a safe hands, right? I mean, the way you can do it is, number one, I think again it comes to the top, right? I mean, for an SME, the CEO or the CFO or the CSO has to ensure that there is a proper training, a proper principle of securing data is given to the employee, right? Because they are the one who are using the data, right? They are the one who are using the email or maybe exchanging of mails through the data and everything, right? So ensuring that your employees are trained about cybersecurity, ensuring all your networks and all your endpoint devices are actually secured. These are some of the basic hygiene that as an SME, you should adopt and go ahead with it, rather than looking for a reactive approach which is called fighting a legal battle with, let's say, with somebody else, right? So
which is often late in many cases.
Absolutely, which is actually late. And for an SME, I mean, I keep talking about it, Ashu. It's not only the data loss; it's the prestige, it's the harm, it's the reputation loss for an organization, right?
Right.
I mean, for example, imagine an SME making an auto parts for, I don't know, for Maruti or for Hyundai, right? They've got a huge database in their system. Imagine that if the data is lost. Imagine the data is has been stolen by somebody. I don't think the bigger organization will give you the job work again, right? So you need to understand it from that point of view. It's not just about losing data; it's about the reputation loss for an organization.
Interesting. I think very important point, Gaurav. Gentlemen, we're towards the end of our conversation, right? How I want these conversations to keep going, right? I think there is just so much more, operational intelligence that each one of you has, right? We do a lot of sessions with many entrepreneurs, right? Trust you me, it's difficult to get out these conversations, but we have to bring a conversation to a close. Dheeraj, I'm going to come to you first, right? And each one of you, as we close this conversation, what, for example, advice, suggestion that you would want to give out to many people who are the SME, MSME space, even large corporates for that matter, right? People in general, right? On digital transformation. Given that this becomes just so much more pertinent, right? Given that we're possibly not going to we're a country which goes back and readjusts ourselves to the normal very quickly, right? But that's not necessarily going to happen, right? What advice would you want to give out to people, right? From a seriousness of dealing with with how business is going to happen, right? Would love to hear from you. Last few points very quickly.
I think it's quite simple. It applies to MSME, but to actually even top corporates as well.
Right.
I think you need to be very open-minded to explore digital, because the biggest break or the success lies in the mind. And in the topmost companies where I was transforming digital, initiatives, the biggest roadblock was actually the lack of belief and adjusting it, collaborating successfully to achieve it. So I think irrespective of the size of organization, as long as you are very open-minded, curious, and open to experiment and check. I think that should be the spirit to become digitally savvy and grow your business.
Super, super. Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you on that one. Milan, I'm going to come to you very quickly. Any suggestions, advices? You're on a mute.
Sorry. The only advice to people is you better unlearn your manual processes so that you can gracefully. So unlearning is a very important aspect to adopt digitization. I think.
Right.
And you know what, Milan, that's the most difficult part, to unlearn something.
Correct. So that's to my mind is my unlearning. That's it.
Interesting. Ankit?
Yeah. So, Ashu, this is how I look at this whole set of event. I do not look at it as a milestone change, as a shift change.
Right.
I look at it as a speed change, an acceleration which has happened.
Right.
And this is not going to go back to the original whatever. Howsoever we deny the existence of it, howsoever we nullify the importance of it, this is going to happen. And it's important to what the people said, Milan said, we have to unlearn a lot of things and focus around how do we adopt this session much more than ever before.
Interesting. Rohan?
I think my 2 cents would be value, impact, and scale, right? I think everything else falls secondary to that. So first is very important to identify what value are you really creating for whoever you're serving. Second is how big is that impact, and third is how largely can you scale it, right? Whether you're going digital, whether you're anything, any process that you're implementing, unlearning, whatever it might be, that all will come after you identify these 3 points, and it's going to be just a matter of time before you have to start implementing those within your company.
Super. I think what is a common concept across every point that each one of you highlighted is that don't be in denial, right? Don't deny the existence of digital, right? Don't deny the existence of how digital is going to be is going to be a critical part of our existence, right? And don't delay. Most importantly, right? I think those are the 2 constants that I take away from this conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out. It was a pleasure to have each one of you with us. I'd look forward to having you join us much sooner across some of the other upcoming conversations that we're going to do at Asia Tech Journal in partnership with Tata Business Services. Thank you so much for taking the time out. It was a pleasure to have each one of you with us. I'll have Gaurav to do a quick round of thanks. Gaurav, over to you.
I think thank you, Ashu, first of all, for carrying out a great job of moderating this. Loved your moderation at the end. Thank you very much, Milan, Dheeraj, Ankit, Rohan, to be and for your time to be a part of this discussion. Great listening from you, all of you guys. As I said, I always keep telling Ashu, every time I walk into a CXORT, I feel like I know this, right? But the moment I walk out of it, I always feel a little richer in terms of knowledge. So thank you again for enriching my knowledge, and great to hear you again. And possibly, I'm really happy that we guys are very close to a time where it's going to be a physical meeting, having a coffee in all of our hands. So look forward to seeing you soon somewhere in a nice hotel lobby.
Sure. And that's on the cards. Gentlemen. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Ashu.